Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. This is our follow-up event to our June Childcare and End Child Poverty California Advocacy Day. My name is Donna. I'm the Director of Government Relations for CAPA. We're thrilled you are all here. I'm going to really quickly get started with a few housekeeping items before we dive in. Evelyn has put the social media toolkit into the chat box. I am also right now linking the most recent agenda for today, so you can follow along there. And a few Zoom logistics. I'm sure at this point everyone is all too familiar with the Zoom platform. But in case you're not, this is a Zoom meeting, not a Zoom webinar. And so what that means is we were hoping that it could feel a little bit more interactive, create community, be able to see each other. But that also means that we just need to kind of keep an eye on keeping ourselves muted. We'd love for you to be on video so we can see who you are. And we will be making sure that everyone is muted until there's an opportunity to ask questions. If you'd like, feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat box. We'd love to know who you are, where you're all from. And also, as questions come up, please feel free to write them into the chat box. And then when there's an opportunity for questions, I'll try to call on you individually so you can unmute yourselves and ask a question of our speakers. We have an excellent panel, two panels lined up of legislators. We have Kim Johnson from DSS. We have the National Women's Law Center joining us. And we are thrilled that we also, as of this morning, have Dolores Huerta joining us. And I think Dolores is on. Dolores, if you could go ahead and unmute yourself if you're there, I'd like to pass it over to you right now.
Oh, thank you very much. And I want to thank everybody for joining. I know it's been a very, very difficult year for everybody. And I just want to thank everybody for all of the work that they've been doing. We know how important it is to end child poverty, to end the poverty that is affecting so many families. And unfortunately, I don't think that we have seen the worst of it. The worst of it, you might say, is yet to come. We know that people haven't been able to work, especially many of our essential workers. And even the farm workers who are essential workers, some of them are working, as we know, many of them are working. But unfortunately, because you have children at home, their income has been cut in half because somebody has to stay home with the children. So we know that this is a group of people that are being very, very adversely affected by the epidemic. And we just want to thank especially all of the legislators out there that have been working so very, very hard so that we can try to get more income into those families that is so sorely needed. And so I know today is going to be a very great day, and I know we have a lot of great things to report. We also know that so much of what we're doing also depends on what's happening at the congressional level. And I guess there's some things that are going to be happening up there. So in a way, we might say that although we might think that some of this is coming to an end, on the other hand, we might have to say this is really just a beginning, okay? So I know it's going to be a great day today, and thank all of you for taking your time to make this event happen in the first place. And it's going to be a very great learning experience for us, and also setting us the agenda for the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dolores. We're so thankful for your partnership, for your ongoing commitment to the work that we're all doing, and for being here with us today. We really appreciate that. Shanti, are you on?
I am.
Awesome. I'm going to turn it over to Shanti Prasad. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shanti Prasad from California Association of Food Banks. I am CAFB, and I'm also part of the California Hunger Action Coalition. We are thrilled to be a part of this event and the events earlier this year, one of them actually in person, and that so many of us can join today virtually. This is one of the, after everything that we're dealing with this pandemic and the economic crisis, this has been a silver lining for me to be able to partner with childcare and End Child Poverty California, and so have other changes that we didn't think that were possible. Like that, and that have happened so fast, like policies to help feed people quickly. And one of the largest movements in all of American history, the Black Lives Matter movement. A silver lining I feel in all of this crisis happening. So I look forward to working with you all in this kind of like intersectional systems approach and thinking more about whole systems for whole people and whole inclusive communities. And lastly, in that vein, I want to just quickly mention a bill, AB 826, authored by Assemblymember Santiago. We didn't put it on our list because we just started working on it right now, but it's to fund emergency assistance for undocumented immigrants in California. It would work like CalFresh, and it's a no-brainer. It's imperative. We have to include everybody who is a part of our communities and our economy in California, and it's the right thing to do. So thank you all. I look forward to the rest of this morning.
Thank you so much, Shanti. We're so grateful for your partnership on this. I'm now going to move down the agenda. Estelle Mitchell, I believe you're on. Estelle from the National Women's Law Center is here to give us a little bit of a deeper dive into a federal overview. So Estelle, welcome, and we're so thrilled to have you here today.
Hi, yeah, thank you. It's great to be with you all. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. I have a PowerPoint. Here we go. Great. So again, thank you all. It's great to be with you all today. I'm Estelle Mitchell. I'm with the National Women's Law Center. I've been with the center for about 2 years now. I work on our childcare team, doing a little bit of income security work. And yeah, so I'm just there's a lot happening on the federal level right now, if you've been paying attention, which I'm sure you all have. And so I'm gonna just try to give a brief overview, but I thought I would start out just with a brief recap about where we've been and kind of where we find ourselves now. So as you all may know, the CARES Act was the first big federal stimulus package that was passed back in March, which is what we are still living in right now. There's been no big packages passed since. That is the package that gave us the $600 per week extra in the unemployment insurance, the Paycheck Protection Program for small businesses, the $1,200 economic impact payments, also known as the stimulus checks. And then for childcare and early learning, that bill had $3.5 billion in supplemental appropriations for the childcare sector administered through the Childcare and Development Block Grant. So there's been a lot of advocacy since then to get, more funding, more relief, and, more legislation in all of the areas that we all care so much about. And the next big package that was recently passed, well, not even recently anymore, in May by the House was the HEROES Act. So that's another one that I think has been getting a lot of attention, but that's kind of just living in the House right now. The Senate didn't take it up. It's, the House is opening, opening bargain for everything that this is for all of the negotiations. It would extend UI. It would extend the $600 extra a week payment. It increases the SNAP maximum benefit by 15%, strengthens the Paycheck Protection Program, and expands it, would give another round of economic stimulus payments, and then included $7 billion for childcare, also again through the Childcare and Development Block Grant. So that's kind of what the House did back in May, but then since then, there's been a series of childcare and early learning specific bills. So I'm just going to briefly go over those, and then I'll touch on the Childcare is Essential Act later on because that one is kind of more at play now, but thought I'd give an overview of what's all happening. So the Childcare is Essential Act was introduced by Senator Patty Murray in the Senate and Rosa DeLauro in the House. That would provide $50 billion for childcare in the form of a stabilization fund that would be administered through the Childcare Block Grant. It's funding that's available for providers who are open or temporarily closed due to COVID-19. Provides a lot of support for the workforce. Helping providers kind of meet the need for the personal protective equipment, making their facilities safe. and just all of the funding that is needed to kind of adapt to the world that we find ourselves in. So that has been, introduced in the House and the Senate, and is kind of the new big bill that we on the federal level and the child care advocacy community are really pushing right now. And I'll go back a bit more to it in a second. Another few bills to be aware of: the Child Care Infrastructure Act was introduced recently by Catherine Clark in the House. That authorizes $10 billion over 5 years for childcare. Also, a lot of great workforce support, and a few other things for childcare on college campuses. A really great bill. Very recently was the Back to Work Child Care Grants Act, which was introduced by Joni Ernst and Maura Alexander in the Senate. And so that's kind of the Republican approach to, the child care crisis that we find ourselves in. And the notable things about that bill are that the funding would be available only to providers who are open and are going to pledge to stay open for a year after receiving funding. And then another big thing is that this bill doesn't have actually any money in it. It used such sums language, which means that it will eventually have money, we expect, in the recent Senate and White House package that's forthcoming very soon. But that bill didn't actually appropriate any funds. So that's kind of where we're at with the Republicans. And then another bill that I think is getting a little bit of attention is the Child Care for Economic Recovery Act, which is introduced in the Senate by in the House by Nita Lowey, and is really like the tax policy approach to kind of helping the childcare sector. It expands the child care tax credit, child and dependent care tax credit, and aims to kind of help provide relief via tax policy. And then, so those are kind of the big child care focused bills. Other federal programs. So I know this group is particularly interested in what's happening with the other programs, and because it's all just very intertwined. And so I will just touch on the big ones. So unemployment insurance is set to expire at the end of July, unless it like next week, very soon, unless it's renewed. I'm going to go back to that a little bit later when I talk about the what's happening right now with the Senate and White House package. So, and then the pandemic EBT program. So as far as we know, that program remains in effect as long as school districts stay closed due to the pandemic, and families will still be able to receive those benefits. And then, so that program is kind of status quo, I think, right now. And then with SNAP, SNAP is still very much like on the table in terms of we haven't seen a lot of movement in the Republican on the Republican side of increasing or providing any kind of extra funding to SNAP. So we're still trying to really keep up the pressure on lawmakers to do more for SNAP, to increase the maximum benefit and the minimum, and then suspend a lot of harmful rulemakings that the White House has promulgated recently. And then, so the stimulus checks, direct cash to folks, we are hearing that some form of stimulus payment will be included in the next package. We don't really know what that looks like just yet. Then related, so right now, negotiations between the White House and the Senate are very, very much ongoing. Things are changing really rapidly. There's a lot in flux. And so really what I say right now could be very different in the next hour. We expect to see a full proposal unveiled at some point today. And what we have definitely heard is that even though the White House and the Republicans in the Senate are going to release their plan today, they're still very far from a deal with House Democrats. And so we probably won't see the package that is going to the White House for the president's signature until next week. But like I said, things are changing very quickly. But some things we do know is that there will be some type of extension for unemployment insurance. It's most likely not going to be the $600 extra per week, but there will be some kind of transition period, and you know, there won't be a kind of a cliff for folks like totally losing that benefit. But we don't really know what that's going to look like, but have heard that there will be at least something. And then there are kind of leaks reporting that the bill will include $15 billion for childcare in the form of a stabilization kind of fund, which is good, but kind of brings me to, you know, I don't know if I have another slide, kind of my next point of the Child Care is Essential Act. And so that is really in play because the House is going to vote on that on Monday, which is really big because it will increase kind of the threshold in the House from the HEROES Act, where I mentioned earlier that the HEROES Act would provide $7 billion for childcare, and the Child Care is Essential Act would provide $50 billion. So it really like raises that threshold in a big way and brings kind of a really new dynamic to the negotiation table, and you know, gives the childcare advocacy community the opportunity to really push for more for childcare if the House is starting out at that high number. And so we're going to see a vote on Monday, and it's expected to pass. But I think, you know, in terms of childcare and early learning right now, it's really critically important to put pressure on federal lawmakers to, you know, pass a package that's going to have $50 billion for childcare, because, you know, we've done a lot of analysis and that's showing that that's what the sector, you know, really needs in this moment. And yeah, so we're just kind of waiting on the Senate and how Senate package to drop, and you know, I'm sure things will change a lot between now and tomorrow, but that's kind of where the federal setup is right now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Estelle. If anyone has a question on the federal piece, feel free to plug it in, and we'll give a minute or so for that, and then we'll move on to our next exciting portion. Estelle, thank you so much for being here today. It's so great having you.
Estelle, thank you so much for being here. It's Jackie Warren. Can I ask a question, Donna?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Hi, just quick question. We understand that in the next day or so that something is going to drop on the Senate side. Do you have a sense of what would be included in regards to food policy, cash policy, childcare, and education? Do you have a sense of what the Senate may be proposing?
Yeah, so what we've seen right now is that there would be about $15 billion in supplemental relief funding for childcare. As what we've seen, we haven't seen a full proposal yet. There's nothing in there about SNAP or food assistance policy. So that's something that I'm sure will change once the Democrats come to the table and you know, put forth what they're proposing. And then in terms of the cash payments, we're hearing that there's going to be another round of stimulus payments, economic impact payments, whatever you'd like to call them. But we just don't know what the criteria will be for those, how much they'll be. But yeah, so that's kind of what we know right now.
Hi, Estelle. This is Janine with CAPA, and I have a question. Do you know in the package that will be introduced if they're addressing liability coverage for family child care homes and centers? This is really sort of an issue that is coming up pretty quickly within the child care field and raising a lot of fear.
Yeah, we've seen that there will be, I'm sorry, do you have something else? Sorry. We've seen that there will be some kind of blanket liability protections. We're not exactly sure what that's going to look like yet for childcare providers, but we are following that closely, but unfortunately I don't have a ton of specific information on that right now, but I do know that there will be something in there about liability protection.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I think I would love it if folks want to add their questions into the chat. And Estelle, if it's okay with you, I'll send out your contact information if folks have any follow-ups specifically. And just in light of time, if it's okay with everyone, I think we're going to go ahead and move forward. Thank you so much for being here, Estelle. We really appreciate your time. Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I am really excited for our next panel, and I'm going to pass it over to Deneen with CAPA to introduce our upcoming speakers. Thank you, Deneen.
First, I want to make sure that we welcome Ileana and introduce Ileana before we go into the next panel. And excuse me, Ileana is with Crystal Stairs, and just from the lens of the community and a parent, Ileana, if you would like to say a couple words, and then we'll go into the next panel.
Sure. Hi, thank you, Deneen, for that introduction. I'm happy to be here, and thank you for including Crystal Stairs. I'm going to speak about our service area and our providers and our families, but I think the messaging that we're hearing is pretty consistent, not just to South LA, but across the state as well. So I want to start with one of the biggest issues that I think we're all hearing that essential working families are experiencing is the problem with family fees and the potential that families may face exorbitant fees and may not be able to pay them, and then may be terminated from programs that they absolutely need to continue being essential workers. We're hearing that fairly consistently from our providers and our families. From a policy perspective, the solution is that obviously the state needs to provide guidance around this issue, and as there is no safety net for some of the families. Another thing, or another consistent message that we're hearing is from providers, is that income is down due to limited enrollment, and costs are up to cover the increased cleaning and sanitation, hiring of extra staff. So the pandemic has just further exacerbated an already fragile system. But there are solutions, and I know that we're going to discuss some of those at the policy and advocacy level here. Obviously, there's an urgent need for an infusion of state and federal funding to ensure sustainability, and more events, us working together in support of more events like the one today, where we get our message out that childcare is critical to the economic recovery of the state and the nation, and keeping this message out in the media, social media, and in front of our legislators and policy leaders.
Perfect. Well, Ileana, thank you so much. I mean, our job is only better when we know how what we do is impacting the community. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and go into the first panel. So first of all, my name is Deneen Micheletti-Colburn. I'm the CEO of the California Alternative Payment Program Association. To all of the partners that have come together to put this event together, let me express my appreciation and gratitude. And thanks so much for all the enthusiastic chat postings, and a huge welcome to those participating for the first time with us. I have the privilege of facilitating a conversation focused on childcare and early learning. For context, prior to COVID-19 crisis, California was dealing with an exodus of family childcare providers and centers. Parents needing access to quality childcare in our 24/7 economy were frustrated by the lack of availability. And the childcare providers and centers that have made their profession of caring and educating our youngest learners were reimbursed between $2.80 to $10 per hour, non-livable amounts by most standards. In March, when the pandemic shut down California, Our already fragile infrastructure of childcare was called upon to stay open and to support the children of essential workers. For family childcare homes and businesses, essential workers, if you will, themselves, they stayed open, putting their own safety at risk. So today, with the closure of many schools already announced for the fall, the demands being asked of family childcare providers and centers to help children with their online classroom work, and the daily reality family childcare providers and centers fear with outbreaks of COVID-19 shutdowns, cleanings, and the threat of liability in this new world, we have asked some leaders in the legislature for their wisdom and insights of how we move forward. Today, we have Assemblymember Quirk-Silva, who has been championing legislation to increase access for working families to childcare, while supporting family childcare providers and centers with a stable funding stream via her bill AB 2883. We have Assemblymember Kevin McCarty, chair of the Assembly Budget Subcommittee 2, that oversees funding for childcare and early learning and has been a champion for our programs for years. And finally, Senator Connie Leyva, chair of the Legislative Women's Caucus, who's been instrumental of making childcare a top priority for protection in all of the caucus agendas. So let's go ahead and dive in. So the first question I have to the members. With the closure of many schools in the fall, do you have any thoughts or expectations of the role that the family childcare providers and centers will have in helping children connect to their teachers virtually? So in no particular order, Assembly members Quirk-Silva, McCarty, and Senator Leyva, just chime in.
I'll jump in. Thank you, everybody, for having me, and it's a real honor to be included in this group of advocates for our youngest and most vulnerable children. There's a quote, I believe it's painted in Sacramento, that says you can judge a community or country by how they treat their most vulnerable. And we certainly can agree that even before COVID, our preschool, young learners, early childhood has not been invested as it should be. We need a real switch in that dynamic. But as a classroom teacher who has done online distance learning, and my husband is also a junior high teacher, at best, it is extremely difficult for families to navigate the distance learning, not only with one child, but if you imagine 2 or 3 children with different age groups, including parents that are working and trying to manage. I really want to give not only hugs and kudos to all of them, because it's an extremely stressful time, but then now to ask our child care providers to navigate, to work on distance types of learning skills that they may or may not be set up for, I think is really placing another level on these providers that may just force some of them to say it's too much. So with that, I wish I could suggest some great ideas, but I would say my advice to parents and educators that I know and stay in contact with is do the best that you can with the materials, with the access you do have, but also know, especially for the younger the child is, they need to have that hands-on. They have to be getting up and moving around, playing, talking, singing like the first 5. That is still valuable. And that is going to be more essential. Stories, singing, all of those things that we know get kids engaged. And of course, online has some excellent programs, but possibly be looking for things like children's yoga online, but things that are going to keep kids upbeat, active, because we know that there's a lot of screen time going on.
Great, thank you. Assemblymember McCarty or Senator Leyva, would you like to weigh in?
I would definitely like to weigh in. Thank you so much for putting this together, and thank you so much for what all of you do. Your job is critically important. And I would just say that I think the childcare field has already stepped up and has already started filling that void, and we couldn't appreciate you more. But we have issues, as the Assemblywoman alluded to, and moving forward, I think there's a lot of changes we need in our childcare system. Mostly it's, rate reform, and how do we make sure that we have a level playing field for all of our childcare centers. But I would just say that we were very pleased in the legislature that we were able to avoid the 10% cuts that the governor wanted to have in the budget. But I would be remiss if I didn't recognize that we know close to 70% of child care centers have closed. So we have to, as a legislature, do everything we can to make sure they can reopen, because you have been doing the job. You have been teaching our children when they have been spending so much time on the screen. And I just think of where my granddaughter goes to her preschool, and she's only 9 months old, so not quite the worry, but what I've heard from the director and what they're doing with the older kids, the kids that are there because mom and dad are trying to go back to work. So I would just say thank you. You're doing a phenomenal job. Let us know how we can also help you, and know that we are we're looking to the future, and how do we make sure that our child care providers are paid a living wage and make sure that they are getting what they need to stay open and fully funded. Also, the cleaning supplies, that has been a big issue, and we have done a lot of work on that. I don't know that we're where we need to be with that, but just know that you have three very strong advocates here with you. Thank you for everything you do.
Okay.
Assemblymember McCarty.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thanks Kappa for putting this together. I did want to address one issue that Ileana brought up from Crystal Stairs. I know it's important. She brought it up related to the family fees. That's something that we are looking at. And when we go back in August to basically fine tune our state budget, that's one of the few issues that we're looking at clarifying in the budget and addressing that. So there's no guarantee, no promises. We're negotiating with the Department of Finance. So if you can help us there, DOF's always really hard, as you know. So I just want to say that out of the top. So the big picture is, yeah, we know that childcare is obviously critically important to our economy every year, but especially during COVID, it's a no-brainer. In order for our economy to get going and for people to get back to work, working parents, of course, primarily women, we know that we need a functional childcare system in California. So we're counting on you all, whether it's family-based homes, community-based programs at community centers and nonprofits, or sites at LEAs, and we know those are few and far between with schools closing. We need those opening for our state to function. And we know it's hard because some of the county orders are limiting the ratios and making it more financially unstable. And we know that this is a field that was never on strong financial footing before COVID, and even now, so even worse. So as Senator Leyva mentioned, we did some things in the budget, saying no to those draconian cuts. We put in there some hold harmless provisions to keep funding stable for centers that are operating, as well as put some over $100 million to expand access to help essential workers. So we know that it's not enough, but it focuses on allowing us to get our economy back going and get people able to get back to work, and allowing the essential workers to continue the work that they're doing today.
Great, thank you. So the next question I have for our panel is, currently there's been direction for closure of K-12 classrooms. However, there has not been clear direction for preschools that may be located on the campuses of these school sites. Do you have any input on how we can secure clearer direction for all programs and not those just operated by an LEA?
Yeah, I can start with that just because I was just talking to our budget staffers this morning about this issue. And we know that with the schools closing, there is an uncertainty that some community people would say, well, how could the school be closed, but you can have the preschool and the child care center open? And there is no direct state directive there. It's based upon the county health directive. So I know we had talked about clarifying it from the state level, but I don't think that's going to happen. It's more going to be based on a county by county level and focusing on what, you know, your county health director and your superintendent of schools is putting out guidance as far as what they can do. But we're encouraging you all to advocate with your locals and say, yeah, this is something that is permitted. It's not forbidden under the state provisions. It's allowed, but it is something that's basically implemented at a local level. But for state preschool, especially full day preschool, it essentially is childcare, right? It's a full day program to help kids become kindergarten ready, but also help working parents get back to work. So we are assuming and counting on center-based programs and school districts to understand this. But from the flip side, from the CAPA perspective, from the alternative payment, that makes it much more realistic that family childcare homes are going to be the viable option for so many of these families.
So I would
Member, yeah.
Oh, sorry. I would just say that we don't have good, clear guidance. I think it's each school district is doing something different. My mom happens to work at a preschool daycare that is connected to an elementary school in Chino Hills. And Chino Hills just voted that no one is going back. And she has been told that they're not reopening the child care center yet. So my hope is that we can get some better guidance from CDE so that we can help all of you. And we know that those child care centers are needed. The one that my mom works at, it's full every morning and every afternoon with young children whose parents are off to work. So I wish I had a better answer. Just know that we're working on it. And when we talk about the distance learning, I'm the co-chair of the Digital Divide Task Force with Superintendent Thurman. We'll be meeting again later today and working to make sure that the 20% of our students in California, a shocking number, who don't have access to either a device or connectivity, that we make sure that that happens. We've already gotten the ISPs to step up and give out hundreds of thousands of devices, but it's not enough. Same with hotspots, but we're still at a shortage. So I think a lot of this is, it's a moving target, and we are just all trying to deal with COVID in the best way that we can. And I think people are doing a really good job for the most part, but we need a little bit better guidance. So we'll keep working on that as well.
Great.
My colleagues pretty much said it all, but I would say we will always probably now talk about before COVID and after COVID. But before COVID, we already had, K-12, where many robust discussions happen about curriculum education, and then it was preschool and early childhood. And I think when we've separated those issues and that type of age level, you always are going to have the investment of K-12, and then preschool and early childhood or newborn are going to come later. And we've in fact seen that. And so we don't have that continuum that we need to see where everybody's included, and we're making we're sending the message to parents that education begins when the child is born. And I think that when and if we get to that place, we won't have these kind of variances in how things are moved forward. But my colleagues right on.
Great, thank you so much. The next question we have, in the childcare field, as I suspect in many other industries, we've not faced the issue of liability insurance and coverage for a communicable disease. Many of our programs feel the threat of potential lawsuits, and this specific issue of the liability is leading to consideration of many contractors not opening or closing their program. Do you have any input on that or consideration of immunity for childcare?
So I would just say that immunity is a big hot topic and issue in every industry right now, both at the federal level and at the state level. I will be candid. I worry about granting immunity. Our school districts are all clamoring for it, but I worry that it then becomes an equity issue. And if we, you know, some people can keep their, more affluent parents can keep their kids home. Maybe it's our lower class our lower income working folks that are sending their kids. And if we grant immunity, then how do we make sure that, be it a child care center, be it a school, make sure that they're doing everything possible to make sure that that facility is clean, to make sure that you know, the teachers are doing everything that they need to do, because they know that they won't be held liable. So I think it's very tricky. We do want to make sure that frivolous lawsuits are not filed. We want to make sure that we protect them. But I think indemnifying industries is very tricky. There's a lot of conversation going on about that right now. And we kind of have to navigate our way.
Great.
Yeah, I'll just add on that. There are two bills going through the process right now. One, maybe one is over in Senator Leiva's committee, one on immunity for K-12 schools and one on higher ed. So if there is K-12, I think we think of education in California as P through 12, and P is really not just pre-K, but early ed and early learning and childcare as well. So we need to make sure that makes sense, especially if these programs are located on school campuses. But as the senator mentioned, you can't just have a blanket, because it leads to other issues. Think of the poultry facilities across the country, or the Amazon warehouses where the employers aren't doing a responsible job in protecting their workers, and you have these massive outbreaks. And so we don't want to, you know, give them opportunity to be irresponsible, but at the same time we realize that our public systems like schools and colleges and the ECE programs are part of us functioning in California. So we're looking at it. It's something that we're trying to reconcile in the last month of the legislature.
Great.
And their comments are perfect.
Great. So I would like to capture just two themes in the chat, and then allow anyone on the line to pose. We'll take maybe 2 or 3 questions if you would like to talk to the panel directly. But the two themes that we would like support from the panel to consider is any of the policies that impact childcare providers or direct us on how to support families. If we could ask that those be made only going forward and not retroactive. We are wasting an incredible amount of money trying to adapt policies back to July 1st. Additionally, the Assemblymember McCarty, I was pleased to hear your comments on family fees. Candidly, family fees are a huge roadblock, and they are directly resulting in disenrollment of many families. Mainly, you know, we support many families of color, mostly single women heading up families, and this policy of family fees is harmful. It is not helpful whatsoever to keeping families stable. So with those comments, I would like to open it up. Is there anyone who has a question that they would like to pose to the panel?
And please either type it into the chat box or use the raise hand feature, and we'll try to call on you.
Okay. Are we seeing any, Donna? Okay, so I'm going to take that silence that you have so thoroughly covered the topics that we wanted you to cover. I want to thank Assemblymember Quirk-Silva, Assemblymember McCarty, and Senator Leiva for participating today. You are our champions. You lift our issues up. You give them a voice. We appreciate all that you do, and we also want to ask that you let us know where you need the troops to go, and we will be there.
Janine, it looks like we have one question that came through.
Oh, okay, so retract all that. The one question.
I'd like the Advancement Project has a question. I'd love for you to unmute yourself and ask. Thank you.
Sorry about that. There was something going on with my computer. Hi, my name is Sedalia King with the Advancement Project, and I just wanted to just kind of highlight, and we touched upon it a little bit regarding equity in childcare, and I just wanted to see if we can touch base a little bit with the members on that. If anything, definitely given like the recent uprisings that we saw happening not only across the nation but across the globe, folks really want to focus on like these equity issues, and we definitely saw the legislature talk really candidly, at least on the floor, about issues regarding equity. And even Senator Leyva, I would love to like uplift and highlight the fact that you definitely acted as an excellent ally on the floor and drawing a lot of attention to these issues. So if anything, is there like, I just wanted to see if there was like a sense of any sort of urgency to continue these conversations at the within the legislature to address like equity issues or early childhood care, and sort of what can we expect not only like in August but like leading into the next year.
I have, oh, go ahead, Connie.
No, go ahead, Sharon. I've already spoken.
Well, I have a few thoughts on it. Number one, in K-12, the words equity and equality are really, if you can believe it, in some areas just emerging as a very important topic. I mean, typically, if you think about your schools, everybody wants the same thing for everyone else, which means everything is equal, and people like that. But the problem there is when you have kids who are in very underserved area, or maybe never went to preschool or never had all of the advantages that we know that kids do well in school. And so then you want to, in essence, be able to give them more to get them to some kind of parity with their peers. And that's where you get that equity and equality, and people really have a hard time with that. So for example, with local control funding formula, it's like, let's put a reading intervention specialist at every single school, but one school may need 4 intervention specialists, and another school may need none because the kids are doing well. So that's the equity and equality. But I do have a bill to address AB 2883, which is related to alternative payment programs to improve the access and viability for child care providers. And I mention this because, again, if it is a private business, like a private type of school that you might send your child to, whether it's a Catholic school, you know that when you enroll your child, you're paying for a month of school. But unfortunately, with our child care providers that are in home, many of them are getting, in essence, shortchanged because they currently are only being paid by the hours the kids attend. And so they can't count on a stable amount of income coming in. And I know that I'm really hoping that we are able to make that improvement, because again, unless we treat our child care providers, who are mainly women, women of color, with some kind of dignity, we're going to continue to see people that say, why do I even want to go into that profession? I'm barely making $2 to $10 an hour, and we need them. The Women's Caucus priority for the last handful of years has been to increase childcare slots. And now with COVID, we see not only the value, but we got to send the message to our child care providers that they not only are worthy, but they need to be paid just as any other business.
All I would add is I think that we are at a point where people finally get that equity and equality are different, and that I hope that we are in a new space where we can really make a difference. And I think that we can. As the chair of Senate Education, when I became chair, I said that the first thing I wanted to do is look at every bill that came to me through an equity lens. So we have work to do, but I think we might be in a good moment where we can actually start making sure that there's equity for all students in preschool, in K-12, and in higher education. So we've got to use this moment.
Yeah, and then just lastly, I think as you were mentioning issue of equity and early education, you bring up a great point. Is if you look at, we know ECE matters, early career education. That's why we're here on this Advocacy Day, and at the halls of the Capitol. I see many of you all the time. But if you look about the issues of the day that we're trying to tackle in California, from criminal justice reform to intergenerational poverty, to the education opportunity gap. It's not an achievement gap, it's an opportunity gap, right? You know, we know that one of the common denominators to fix these things, if you ask Nobel laureates, is early education. So I think that as we're looking for remedies to work on these issues, we can go back and talk about how ECE matters, and it really will help us move the needle on all these issues that we're trying to focus on.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for participating, and thank you for allowing us to be your cheerleaders, and we are cheering you on to some positive outcomes in August, or next week, I guess, starting. So with that, have a thank you.
Thank you.
Feel free to stay on.
Thank you.
So our next, you're welcome. So our next speaker is here. It is Kim Johnson, Director with the Department of Social Services. And many of you on the line know Kim. She is a fierce leader. She is a compassionate facilitator and really, really does due diligence to listen to all parts of an issue before making recommendations or facilitating outcomes. I just feel very, very pleased that Kim is sort of in the helm as childcare makes a transition over to the Department of Social Services. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kim Johnson. Kim?
Good morning, and thank you very much, Deneen, for that welcome. It is an honor to be with all of you, and always a privilege to hear from the field and community on what's most pressing and burning across communities in the state, and just appreciate your partnership in that space. It's also an honor, I see Jackie Wong and others, to see this group and this work continue as the Department of Social Services facilitated the Lifting Children and Families Out of Poverty Task Force a couple of years back. And so in that capacity that we were facilitating, where I was the Deputy Director, it's an honor to be with you now as the Director and the Governor's appointee to this position. And I just want to appreciate to all of you, and always trying in these moments and unprecedented times to really celebrate the moments and opportunities we have to think about how we're responding. I want to significantly lift up and applaud the legislator members that just spoke in their partnership, both through COVID and our response and our ability to be responsive in communities, and also through the budget. So I'll highlight some of that work going forward. But this administration, as you all know, across the board, with the additions of individuals like Dr. Burke Harris, who are focused on trauma-informed and healing practices, and real focused commitments in early learning and childcare space, with positions focused on that work, is just critical, and I'm just grateful to be a part of it. So I'll start with just a little bit on COVID response. I have been on for a little bit, so I've been able to hear some of the things that have been focused on. But I think most critically, and certainly from our seat and vantage point at Social Services, yes, this is a public health pandemic, but it's also creating tremendous economic impact across those who were already experiencing poverty, but also bringing individuals into poverty and heightening some of the inequities across our systems. And that has been a big charge that we have been working again to be responsive to. So creating new policies, resources, principles, actually trying to look at some of the ways that we have streamlined enrollment into some of the benefits and processes that we have created, and what can stay, right? What can we learn from what we've been able to accelerate and continue on throughout these programs and systems. We had the privilege at Social Services to lead the Indicator 2 work of the Governor's 6 indicators on the roadmap to reopening, and that one was focused on preventing COVID for those who are at greatest risk. Those are our elders, our population over 65, those who have underlying health conditions, and those who are impacted by the social determinants of health and the places where they live, work, play, and pray. So that has been our charge. Out of that work, that's where you've seen initiatives like Project Room Key, which has been focused on supporting isolation and quarantine options that are non-congregate sheltering for individuals experiencing homelessness. That's where you've seen the Disaster Relief Assistance Program for immigrants, for populations who were not able to access some of the state and federal benefits that were available to others in relief. That's where you've seen tremendous response in food assistance programs, everything from creating new waivers with the federal government and flexibilities, online purchasing opportunities for those who are receiving CalFresh, new resources, additional dollars to increase the maximum amount for households, and also our pandemic EBT program, which is matching all of the children that are currently we're receiving free and reduced lunch and getting them connected to pandemic EBT, which is up to $365 a month per household for those additional supports. Across the board in child welfare, it's the resources to make sure that particularly our youth in the foster care system have access to distance learning, the equipment needed, the hotspots needed to make that as successful as it can be. A number of different opportunities there, but it's also in the prevention of being able to deploy essential protective gear for our childcare workforce, our IHSS workforce, and others. So a lot has happened. We've had, again, tremendous partnership in resources and responsive, and there's more to do, no doubt, as we continue on in this work. I want to also lift up that partnership in response to COVID in the budget. So a few of these things you've spoken to, but I will highlight a few others. No reductions to CalWORKs grants as we went into the budget and recognized that some of the proposals were hard, but we certainly came in with the principle of recognizing the economic impacts of preserving the dollars for the individuals experiencing poverty. So no CalWORKs grant reductions. We're absolutely seeing increases in our caseload for CalWORKs and for CalFresh. And so again, looking at how we can adopt flexibilities in that space. In CalWORKs, we also have restored the time limit to 60 months instead of 48 for that program, which will begin in 2022, and also extending the flexibilities around the educational and other activities that essentially count towards participation in the CalWORKs program. On food assistance, again, trying to really, truly embrace some of the technological improvements around electronic interviewing and enrollment into the processes. Also doing integrated application processes between CalFresh and our Medi-Cal program. And of course, additional emergency food assistance as we see food programs and food banks really being impacted and individuals for the first time engaging in some of those services as well. Also, just again, building on the Project Room Key success, Project Home Key has launched just this week, and that's to support the acquisition of some of those hotels and motels that we were able to have been able to utilize across the communities in the state to actually acquire them, renovate them, and create a longer term housing support for individuals across the state. Again, on foster care, we of course have an extended foster care system in California that supports youth up into their older adulthood until they're 21, and certainly even at that point, and certainly in this economic conditions, we want to support them even longer. So for those who would have otherwise exited the foster youth system, we have extended the support for those youth who would have otherwise exited so that they can remain in and get the supports associated with that work. And then of course in childcare, really continuing some of those additional emergency vouchers for essential workers and other vulnerable populations moving forward. Obviously some support for one-time stipends for the workforce, again, more of that essential protective gear, created some of those mobile-friendly applications that we're looking to expand upon on consumer education resources that were already underway pre-COVID. And of course, also trying to support the technical assistance on what we've referred to as pop-up childcare, but really that's by and large a lot of the small family childcare programs who've received waivers from our community care licensing division to serve additional kids and become large family childcare providers, and helping them actually streamline their application process to do that, as well as some other center-based programs that have popped up along the way as well. So as Deneen mentioned, the transition is also a big point of focus where many and most of the programs currently administered by the Department of Education's Early Learning Division will be transferring over to the Department of Social Services effective July 1 of 2021. We have a stakeholder meeting later this afternoon. Please stay tuned for more opportunities. So much of what we want to do in this process and opportunity is hear from you. I want to give a special shout out to those who participated and even were on the Early Childhood Policy Committee's Parent Advisory Council meeting, the first meeting that took place yesterday. I was able to listen to that, and really those are some of the opportunities that we are really trying to address with this move, where we're looking at whole family approaches, where we're recognizing what it means for families to have to essentially be re-traumatized in certain circumstances, telling their story over and over for programs and services. And so we really want to streamline those processes so that that array, this robust array that we should be very proud to have built, that is unlike any other state across our country, can really be accessible, and people understand how all of the pieces between food supports, childcare and early learning opportunities, housing supports, cash assistance, how all of these things really come together to truly give individuals that have been experiencing poverty a true opportunity for new economic mobility. And so we're very eager, anxious, and excited to hear from you as we are working through those processes. We, both in COVID and one of the priorities of the department, the year that I've been here, that we are lifting up, two I want to just call out. One is really looking at data-informed decision-making. We've had a number of ways through COVID. We've created new dashboards and abilities that we have posted online to really be able to see what is occurring, what's happening across our state with what we're experiencing, and how we're utilizing that data to inform and leverage resources and address the issues that are coming up. And so that's a theme, and it's going to be a theme in the transition to how can we really maximize and leverage the data systems and really integrate those data systems. So we're looking at the sequence and the duration of our families' participation in the various programs, so we can use that information to truly improve and have continuous quality improvement practices built in. The other I want to lift up is around equity, which we've had some conversation already about here, and again with the true civil unrest and what we've seen as actual murders of communities, African American, Black communities, and others, men, women, transgender. I mean, we really have another awakening and awareness of significant issues that we have related to racial equity across the country. We have commitment from this legislature, from this administration, and a demand from communities to address racial inequities. We established an Office of Equity in November of last year. Part of that office's charge is really to work hand in hand with a new chief data strategist position that we also created to make inequities visible. That means we're actually able to disaggregate our data and identify where our programs are working, who they are working for, and why not. Who are we accessing and reaching, and who are we not, and why not. And we have to be able to continuously answer those questions to be able to make change and be very intentional about the strategies that we are, the program design, the ways in which we're even creating programs, working hand in hand with community on the solutions that we're working towards. So those are also themes you'll see in the transition and focus areas that you'll see along the way. I also want to call out in the transition, one of the other additional programs within the Department of Education that's transitioning is the Child Care and Adult Food Program. And of course, we want to build and integrate that work with our CalFresh nutrition work, both on the nutrition front to really continue nutrition education work, but also to look at how for the program administrators and the workforce across the state, how we can reduce some of the burden on multiple entities, multiple contracts, asking for some similar information. How can we make that the same? How can we align reporting? How can we really support the workforce to do what they signed up for, which is that true work with parents, with children and parents, and engagement there to support them. So you'll see again opportunities where we're trying to look holistically at the requirements across the programs. I also want to alleviate what we've heard was some anxiety from the field around contracts and continuity, and what does it mean if I'm a state preschool contractor and a general child care contractor, and now I have two different departments. We are absolutely committed to make that process simplified, to be aligned, and to work with CDE. And I want to just also echo that the continued work of integration of the child care and early learning system with the K-12 system is absolutely a commitment we have. We fully embrace and appreciate the system as something that's not only supporting the workforce engaging in work, but also for the tremendous gift and benefit it brings for child development, for children's learning. And social services has a number of programs that we've had for years. We also have been the single state agency in child welfare. We're looking at prevention all the time. So we again are excited about the opportunities to lift up what it means to have that opportunity for a high quality early learning experience, and how that really sets the trajectory of a child on their way, and how it really supports intergenerational poverty and disrupts that work. I want to also just further that for families, again, back to the point I was making, and it was very well shared by a number of parents yesterday on the committee meeting, is that really on the access to the array, really looking at our eligibility processes and identifying what we can do in that space. We've been working on planning of a verification hub for a number of years, where you have the ability to actually have the systems engage and ping the information they need to keep people on and connected to the benefits and services they are, so that it doesn't become, a come into the office, do more, a lot of the policy that I really want to applaud. Many of you who have championed around 12-month eligibility makes a tremendous difference in avoiding disruption and churn for families' ability. So we want to build on that work and continue that across all programs, making it easy to connect to, but also easier to stay on and maintain while families are doing the great work and receiving the services that support them. So I think I will pause there. I'm happy if there's time to answer a few questions, but again, just want to say you will hear on the transition point much more from us. There'll be many opportunities to engage along the way, and we look forward to the partnership, and thank you for all of your partnership in these efforts.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your leadership, Director Johnson. We are just so grateful, and I think someone in the chat said you walk the walk, you talk the talk. You are the perfect director for us, especially in this crisis. You get the interconnectedness between early care and education and poverty, intergenerational poverty. And we are just so grateful for your vision, for your intentionality, especially when it comes to inequities and justice, and as it applies to Black and Brown families in our communities, and just so grateful. I know that we have the next panel is up and they're waiting. I'm happy to take a question or two, Donna, if there is something that I haven't seen one. But I also wanted to create space, because I know that I'm not sure if Dolores is going to be on here the entire time, and I'm wanting to allow some time for Dolores, who is also the co-chair of the End Child Poverty in California kind of campaign right now. And so with that, if you don't mind, I would like to give it to Dolores, unless there is a burning question we should answer. Dolores, so you're on mute. It's just, she's the original I am so grateful to introduce Dolores Huerta. She is an American icon. Everybody that, we look up to her. I am just always so honored to be in her space and her grace. And I just am grateful for everything that you've done to pave the way for us, Dolores. So as a leader in this space.
I just thank you. I just want to thank Ms. Johnson for that very enlightening, invigorating, inspiring presentation that you just made. We know that the children, as we always say, are not just our future, but our present, and just showing us all of the work that we need to do and all the support that we need to do to give our children. And thank you for incorporating the whole issue of racial equity that the Advancement Project brought forward earlier, because I think it's something that we definitely need to address. I firmly believe that if we can teach we know that our children are not racist, that is something that they inherit from their culture, from their parents. And when we can start really thinking about incorporating this into our early childhood education and into our child care that we do, which I know is adding another burden to child care providers, but I think it is something that is just so necessary, so that we can erase the ignorance that exists in our society, and we can start with our children. And I know that we have to expand this so much. This has got to be a top priority, in terms of all of our agendas, of, to have early child care, early learning for all of our children, and something that we've got to, keep hammering and keep working for that, and really try to make that happen. And if not now, hopefully after the next election. Si se puede, we can do it. Thank you.
Si se puede, for sure. Thank you. Okay. I was remiss in not introducing myself. I am Jackie Tu Hung Wong. I'm the Vice President of Policy and Advocacy for the End Child Poverty in California campaign. But I am not the star of the show. The next panel is, and I want to start with we have the privilege of being joined by folks who actually were with us last year on our End Child Poverty in California bus tour. I'm not sure if any of them were there when we had to push the bus out of the mud with the nuns, but I know that some folks were waiting for us. So we have Senator Caballero, Senator Skinner, Senator Hurtado, Assemblywoman Wicks, and Assemblymember Bonta, who is joining us. But before we get to that, we like to center our conversation, our focus around kind of community voice. And I have the honor of introducing Monique Rosas, who are one of the Dolores Huerta organizers in this space, to actually kick it off a little bit. And then we will begin a facilitated conversation with our next. Monique, you're up.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Jackie, for that. I want to welcome you guys all to our second panel on anti-poverty and anti-hunger. My name is Monique Rosas, and I'm going to be starting our panel off by thanking you guys for all being here and showing up for our most vulnerable communities. As a single parent in poverty, we know what we need to survive. We need the tools to secure our livelihood. The SB 1409 bill is expanding Cali EITC to all undocumented families will allow us to be the champions of this goal for all people. I've experienced the positive and negative feelings that come from seeking assistance, and it can be dehumanizing and overwhelming. SB 1409 and the Cal EITC auto filing bill will allow us to simplify access for families so they can become unstuck. This will reduce mental health issues and also restore hopefulness and self to achieve the goal that seems out of reach. We're grateful for the recent win of extending the Cal EITC to undocumented workers with children under 6, but we know we need more champions to advocate for all children and working parents, just like my best friend, Adriana Aguilar. Extension of the Cal EITC, the Earned Income Tax Credit and the Young Child Tax Credit for all undocumented workers during a global pandemic will relieve our essential workers and restore hope for their future as well as ours. 69% of all immigrants in the labor force and 74% of undocumented workers are essential workers during a pandemic. More than half of our essential workers are undocumented. It would be a disservice to ourselves and humanity to allow our essential workers to be without financial relief during a pandemic. the beauty in paying it forward and leading by example is what we'll all overcome this with a full of hearts. Before I introduce my best friend, I'd like to share a quote with you guys. And the quote is says that immigrant parents with their wings cut, they still teach their children to fly. And I think that's true for my friend. And I want to introduce her to you guys since she's important to me. She's going to share her testimony with you guys. Good morning, everyone. My name is Adriana Aguilar, and I wrote down my speech, so I'm going to read it to you guys. So I came to America 10 years ago as an immigrant, and I'm still one today. Through the years that I live in America, this year, 2020, had to be one of the toughest years as an immigrant. It's hard to get a job because of our legal status, and especially with this year of the COVID-19, it's more harder to find a job when everything is closing and even citizens are losing their job. I'm a single mother of a 7-year-old, so I have to have a job to provide for expenses, bills, and rent, and also food. We don't get an access to get help at all. It's been a pretty tough year. My mom is also an immigrant, and she's been without a job since the pandemic started. It's pretty stressing when we have a big situation and we have to worry about how to bring food to the table and provide expenses and also paying the rent. I really hope that there was a way to help immigrant communities with food and other help. There's other immigrants that are in a worse situation than I am. I experienced some of them that there are closest friends that came to our house because they didn't have a job and they lost their place. So, sorry, I'm just getting a little yeah. So my point is that we hope that there is people out there that can help us because there are seniors and children involved in here, and everyone was adapted as an immigrant to have their own jobs, but now with everything that's going on, people are really stressing, and I'm sure if there was help, then a lot of people will be with no stress and children will be more in a better position of eating. But yeah, thank you for your time. That was my speech.
Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate that. And thank you for your courage in terms of sharing your story. So I know that was really touching to me. And so again, I'm gonna move on to our panelists and wondering if Senator Caballero, Senator Skinner, Senator Hurtado, Assemblymember Wixon, Assemblymember Bonta, if you wouldn't mind coming off mute, and hopefully we won't get feedback. And I have a couple of teed up questions for you. And as we think about this pandemic and how it's actually impacted communities of poverty, we know that before COVID-19, that 1 in 5 kids lived in poverty, and that almost 500,000 lived in deep poverty. And for the records, that's a family of 3, single mom, 2 kids living on less than $13,400 a year. I don't know, I know that there are many parents on this, and in my mind, I don't know how you make ends meet when that is the case. I know that all of you actually stood up with us on the bus tour and said that California needs to change this. For the richest state in the nation, we should not have this level of poverty and crisis. So how do we continue to think big and act bold to protect people from significant economic setbacks due to the effects of the current pandemic? It's been said that we should never ever let a good crisis go to waste. And how can we dig ourselves out of crisis and come out of it even better than before, especially from that equity and racial justice lens? I'm going to call on Senator Skinner. It looks like her mic is off. So,
Jackie, thank you, and thank the folks who have spoken already. I think this is the essential conversation to have right now. In addition to the conversation about the structural racism that exists in all of our institutions, and Black Lives Matter, this issue of the depths of poverty that so many of our residents live in is our moral responsibility to and to do more than talk about it. And I think what we can talk about programs, we can talk about various things, but what we have to acknowledge is the type of capitalism that we have here in America is basically designed, it depends on people being poor. And we have to confront that. The whole issue of the low wages, of not having family programs that support a family who has children to be able to work. So the fact that we don't have universal early education, that we don't have universal health care, that we have such low wages, and you can go on and on. So we have to do more than talk. And the problem right now is that with the pandemic-induced economic downturn, we know, of course, it's affected low-income workers the most, and so people in poverty the most. And we cannot have a situation like the last recession where, with this economic downturn, the state is faced with making cuts that make family situation even worse. And so, and I know that a couple of my colleagues are involved in considering this, I think that we have to very, very seriously look at some new revenue. And as much as the state budget before the downturn seemed like it was so rich and had a surplus and such, we do still have the fact that a very small handful, I'm not going to say percents, I'm going to say a handful of people, a handful of corporations and a handful of people have a concentration of the wealth. Across the country in the past 10 years, the wealth of the top handful of people, the top 1%, has now surpassed the combined wealth of 80% of the rest of the entire country. So in California, we're a microcosm of that. So I am looking at a bill right now that would not, it's interesting. It's not really a wealth tax. There's other people who are looking at that, but it is where Californians have to pay capital gains, wealthy Californians, they have to pay capital gains. And so what I'm looking at is an advance on those capital gains, that you pay them up front. We know they're going to be due, you pay them up front so that we have the money now, say next year, so that we are not cutting our child tax credit, so that we are not cutting our earned income tax credit, and so that we can potentially even be in the position of eliminating the work requirement for the earned income tax credit. Because if there's not jobs, how is it that we have to require you to work in order to get that? And if there's no child care, how can you work? So I think we have to look at those, but we also have to have some new revenue sources in order to do so. And my staff provided me some great talking points that were more specific to things like our food CalFresh program and things like that. But I really wanted to weigh in on this bigger picture, and I'll stop there.
Thank you for that, Senator Skinner. Are any other senators or senators wanting to add? And I know that
I can add to that. This is Buffy. Hi.
Hi, Buffy.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's such a great panel to be on, both with my colleagues, but also anytime you're on a panel with Kim Johnson, Dolores Huerta, and Adriana, and the other folks that are there, it's you're in the right place. So thanks for having me. You know, I totally agree with Senator Skinner, and I think she laid that out very well. And I think the thing we need to figure out is, you hear people say, okay, I can't wait to go back to normal. Normal wasn't working for so many people. You know, we had a 47% increase in homelessness in Oakland in the last 2 years. That's not the normal that I want to go back to. You know, so we need a bigger, bolder vision of what that looks like. And I think what the COVID-19 crisis has done is really illustrated to us the fragility of our social safety net system, you know, and the fact that we are having the issues that we have. And so my hope is that we use the crisis as an opportunity to redefine what a social safety net system looks like, to ensure we have paid leave policies, to ensure we have affordable and accessible childcare. You know, I'm 39 weeks pregnant right now, and the baby could come any moment now. And I have a 3-year-old, and so I know how hard it is. And I come from a place of privilege, you know, and if folks in a place of privilege are having a hard time, it is so difficult for working class folks to manage the childcare situation in particular. You know, we have to fund our public schools. We need better healthcare for folks across the board. There's so many things that this COVID-19 crisis has shown us in terms of the fragility that many communities already were experiencing, especially Black and brown communities disproportionately. So we can't go back to what normal was, because again, it wasn't working for folks. And I agree, we have to figure out new revenue streams. And frankly, a lot of this comes down to Prop 13 and how the structural inequities that have been created because of Prop 13 and the tax reform that we need to really confront. And I think Senator Skinner said it the right way, just the capitalist system that we live in and the fundamental relook of the distribution of wealth in the country and in California, I think needs to have a hard look. So I look forward to working with my colleagues on that, but I just want to echo and agree with her sentiments.
Yeah, I'm out.
Senator, I saw Senator Hurtado first. I apologize, Senator Bonta, but you're next, and then Senator Caballero.
Defer to Senator Hurtado.
Okay. Hi, everybody. First and foremost, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here with you today and to be able to say a couple of words. I'm so excited and to see our beloved here in the Central Valley and beyond, Dolores Huerta. I haven't had the opportunity to see her in a long time, so I'm glad to see her even if it's over Zoom. You know, as you know, many may know, I come from I represent the Southern Central Valley. And the Southern Central Valley, I just kind of want to give you a little bit of background and context, is prior to the pandemic, we were facing 7 to 8%, as high as 12% unemployment rate in my Senate district. And this was when the rest of the state was enjoying 3 to 4% unemployment rate. So we have historically and for a very long time have been just families that are living below the poverty line. And this pandemic now has made it as high as 24% in parts of my district where the unemployment rate has gone up. And now it's probably a little bit above that. And I know that on the average, I think that the state is about 14% unemployment right now during the pandemic. So as you can see, there's a significant difference in you know, the part that I represent in the rest of California. And I know there's a lot of people struggling right now. And that's actually how, you know, I came to know Dolores personally, because here in the Valley, poverty does not discriminate. And it, you know, it hasn't with me, it hasn't with my family, it hasn't with my you know, loved ones and neighbors and people that I don't know. And that's kind of what got me into running for office and how I came to, you know Dolores and her son, who were very helpful when I was running for city council way before the Senate. But, you know, I think in terms of how to, you know, the idea of thinking big and being bold during this pandemic to really turn things around, and you know, representing a region that is, you know, amongst the 5 poorest regions in the nation. I think that maybe sometimes you don't have to necessarily think about it as thinking big. I think as elected officials, we have always a responsibility to think bold, but I think that a better question is, you know, what are we doing wrong? I mean, I certainly ask myself that all the time. What am I doing wrong? What, you know, what is at the state level, what are we doing wrong? What is it that is just causing so much poverty in our region and beyond? And is it policies? Is it the budget? And I think that we really got to, you know, think about it in that way. And we really have to go above and beyond to get input from the community of what's not working for them, right? And I think that, you know, during this time, I represent California's, you know, agricultural region, right? And we have a lot of essential employees, farm workers, and I've I've had this in my mind. It's like, how can I make an impact in their lives, and how can we turn it around, not just now during the pandemic, but moving forward. And I think at the end of the day, it comes down to opportunities. We need to be able to provide those opportunities to those that need it the most. And I actually have legislation going this year, SB 1103, that creates career pathway opportunities for farm workers and those who have long struggled. And it's, the intention is to be intentional, to target those that have long been neglected, because they want opportunities too, they deserve opportunities too. And once again, I think it's what can we do better? How have we failed the people of California? And I'll take responsibility for that, and I think there's a lot of room and opportunity to be bold, but we got to start with where are we going wrong? And sometimes it could be simple policy changes, and sometimes it may require a little bit more, but and I want to give just an example. I know Senator Caballero and I work a lot on water and a lot of Central Valley issues together, but and I'll give a quick example. I know we're at about 24% unemployment here in the Southern Valley, but we have a policy change that it's much necessary and needed. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. It's known as SIGMA. But that policy, we're looking at 84,000 additional job losses in the state of California as a consequence of that policy. 42,000 of those jobs would be in my Senate district. So imagine the challenge and the frustration that even I face, knowing that people are already struggling, and we're going to have more, and that's just unacceptable. And so that's what I think about. And I think it's preparing for the now, addressing the now, but it's also the unexpected. How do we work towards being bold about addressing the future as well?
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. I appreciate the regional. There was a comment that Andrew Cheney put in. It's like poverty doesn't discriminate. It's diverse across California. And so I appreciate that. Assemblymember Bonta, thank you for being patient.
Of course. Thank you, Jackie, for the opportunity to be with you and with this incredible coalition. Thank you for all the great work that you have done, are doing, will do in the future, and always honored to be with my colleagues in both the Senate and the Assembly, especially my East Bay colleagues, Senator Skinner and Assemblymember Wicks. And I can't miss the opportunity to express my respect and admiration for Dolores Huerta, as I know we all have, and I'll feel so strongly about her leadership and are inspired by it. Just a couple quick thoughts. I believe that in California we have a tale of it's a tale of two states. We've generated some of the greatest wealth in the history of the world, and we also have some of the deepest abject poverty in the nation, especially when it comes to child poverty. And California proudly leads on so many things. We love the statement that as California goes, so goes the nation, but there are some places where that isn't a source of pride, where our leadership in terms of number of homeless and level of poverty and child poverty is not a point of pride, but recognizing it and being committed to addressing it is absolutely important. I think all of the leaders on this panel are committed to a California for all, one that uplifts everyone, despite your race or ethnicity, your gender, your zip code, the life circumstances that you grew up in, and are committed to having everyone meet their full potential and be able to realize their dreams. And I think this moment is special, as you mentioned, Jackie. It's full of pain and anger and frustration and anguish, but it also, as you mentioned, provides opportunity, because we really do have the whole world, the nation, the state focused on some of the systemic and structural inequities, racism, inequalities that we haven't focused on. And in order to solve a problem, you have to agree on what the problem is. And there is broad consensus now. And a lot of us have been doing this work for a long time, so it's not new to us. But for some it is. And I welcome their entry into this debate to provide solutions and to make our nation something that is more consistent with our founding ideals. And folks have that equity lens now. They're talking about it, they're using it, they're asking the question, who is the most vulnerable and how can we help them? Who is hurt first and worst? And what kind of supports do they need? Our essential frontline workers are being widely recognized, as they should be, for being the heroes that they are. And we're talking about providing essential supports and services to our essential workers. And that's important. That's the right conversation. So I'm excited about that opportunity, even though this moment comes with a great deal of pain. And I'm proud of what we've been doing in California. You know, the EIT extension that you talked about, an expansion that you talked about, you know, I've been able to vote on 2 minimum wage increases over the course of my legislative career. We have some of the strongest tenant protections in the history of the state and the strongest in the nation with AB 1482. We continue to support unions, which are proven to uplift Black and brown communities and women and immigrants. We're building towards healthcare for all. But we still need to do more. And I'm excited about some of the ideas that I'm seeing, like a universal basic income being proposed to get cash in people's pockets. We're looking at the pilots trying to iron out some of the bugs. I'm looking at a program for fast cash where you don't have a bureaucratic gauntlet to get through before you can get cash in your pocket, so you can, you know, pay your rent at the end of the month or get your car out of the shop. And we do need to generate more revenue. This is a time not to cut, not to go to austerity measures, but to invest in people who need it most. And I'm very thankful for Senator Skinner's leadership on this issue, her unrealized capital gains proposal. There's also a millionaire's tax being proposed and a wealth tax. And together, I think we can find investments in those tools to really support folks who need it, who are fighting for us, who are keeping us healthy, getting food on our table, our first responders. So this moment is a moment of crisis for sure. And there is opportunity to create a more equitable, more just, more fair society in it as well.
Thank you so much for your words, Assemblymember Monta. I think I'm going to steal this from somebody else. It's not a moment, it's a movement. And we are part of a live movement right now. We cannot let that go to waste on all fronts. So thank you for that. I know that the governor started to use the what is this moment, and I'm going to change it and say we are part of this movement together, and grateful for everybody, all the leaders who are on this call or on this webinar and leading in real time. Senator Caballero, thank you also for your patience.
Thank you so much. Well, first I want to recognize and thank Monique Rosas and Adriana Aguilar for sharing their stories and speaking. It was very powerful and very moving. And I know it's not easy to get in front of a bunch of people, even if it's virtually, and share your story. So thank you to them. I'm also appreciative of Dolores Huerta being on this call and her advocacy on behalf of poor people. It is, she's spent many years doing this, and I appreciate that she's still out there, you know, fighting the good fight. So my perception after listening to all of us speak is I also want to, well, let me just say that Buffy, you look great. We are with you. You do make 39 weeks look pretty darn good. And I do want to recognize her comment, which is that normal is simply not good enough. That really, I think, is the story of today, is that we just can't go back to normal because it's not good enough. It wasn't good then, and it's even worse now. But let me just say that you know, Rob says that we have you know, two different groups, but I think what you're hearing is we have very different issues based on where you are in the state. My good friend Senator Hurtado is right to the south of my district. Her district is right to the south of me. So we represent a very big portion of the Central Valley, and if there's any place where there is stark contrast, not only between the haves and the have-nots, but between the urbans and the rurals, it's in that district. frankly, the first thing that comes to mind is in terms of equity and justice, as we talk about what's not working and the kinds of impact it has on our communities, is the whole issue of undocumented workers. You know, to me, frankly, to determine that farm workers are essential workers, which I know they are, and I believe it in my heart. They produce the food that we eat, the fresh fruit and vegetables that we all enjoy and that we prioritize as important to our well-being and good health. They're the ones that put that food on the table. And for them to be declared essential, but if they're undocumented and if the immigration ICE comes in and does one of their raids, they can be deported, to me is an atrocity. It is to say, we think you're so important that you need to go to work and risk your health and that of your family, but you can't be here illegally in order for us to respect you as an individual. What it really does is it creates this animosity in the community and this sense of injustice and second-class citizenship that really is unacceptable. And so in our communities, that's probably, for me, that has been the most outrageous part of this pandemic. Everybody is under stress. There's economic pain. There's a lack of testing supplies or lack of PPE. And farm workers have been impacted by that tremendously, in addition to the fact that in many of the communities, the social distancing just is not happening. And they're still being asked to get in overcrowded buses and travel together. So that those inequities between the essential, what's really essential, and what it takes to keep our local economy going and what it takes to make sure that we put food on the table, which is a national security issue, is really complicated in rural California, and it really creates for some inequities. And so that whole issue is critical. And then you get into the universal kinds of things. We need universal healthcare, universal childcare. We have a great inequity in internet distribution and speed, which is tremendously impacting our children as they shift over to a different way of learning. We have a housing crisis, so we need to build affordable housing. All of these issues are exacerbated by a pandemic that basically says if you can afford to live in your own home and not have to go to work and work from home, that you're more likely to survive and to be healthy than those families that are essential workers and have to go out and work and maintain our economy and our workforce. So for me, it's the pandemic has really magnified the inequality and made it very difficult to see where there may be some solutions unless we're all working to make sure it works for everybody in the community. And I think the legislature has taken some bold acts in terms of including undocumented workers in many of our programs, and also continuing to protect immigrants, but we can't do it on our own. So there's a bigger stage we need to operate in. And so as a final note, one of the things I think we can do much better is to look at policies that hinder the delivery of our support systems to our neediest families. And it's one of the reasons why I am authoring SB 1409, which basically just tells the Franchise Tax Board to figure out what would it take to do a workaround our current system that requires that you file your taxes in order to get the Cali ITC. The uptake on that program is so small and so slow that we need to figure out a way to be able to advise people that they're entitled to the money and just get them the money. It's such an important program. But let me just also say thank you for the opportunity to speak. This has been a great discussion, and I want to say that we're all here and want to work together despite the challenges that we have identified.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time and being here. Definitely, I think there's a theme: more cash in the pockets of families, especially poor families, makes a difference. Because despite other narrative, you know what they pay for? They pay for food. They feed their children. And so I think that's something we need to remind ourselves of. And that our essential child care workers are unfortunately part of that working poor. I think we forget that sometimes, that the rates are so low that we are fighting, we are one voice and one family here. And so really grateful for leaders like all of you all and the coalition members, and just we have more to do. And I am hopeful for leaders of our future and what California will learn because of leaders like you. I'm gonna open up for, I know it's 12:16, but we're gonna open up for questions, and Dolores has something to say before we open up the questions. But Dolores, you had some, you just muted yourself, sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank the legislators for joining us today and for giving us kind of this bold vision that we need to follow. And that really, to me, it's not only a vision, but it's a call to action for everybody that's on this meeting today, so that we can support them in the work that they're doing. Because sometimes, like Nancy, I think she said she had to get off, but you know, her vision is so bold, and it's not going to happen unless all of us support them on the legislation that they have, which means that we have to really, we have to step up our work in terms of getting our constituents, all of our constituents, people that are on Zoom, to support these the legislators, and make sure we get all of our people in our districts to make sure that our representatives, you know, our people in the Assembly, our people in the Senate, support the work that they're doing. Because if we don't do this together, it makes it very, very difficult for them. I'm very grateful to all of you for all of, you know, all your concern and all that you're doing for us. And we want to wish Buffy good luck on the delivery, Buffy.
Thanks, Dolores.
Just one more thing, and that is, and it was kind of indirectly mentioned, but don't forget that we have Proposition 15 on the ballot, okay? Proposition 15 on the ballot, schools and communities first. And just want to remind everybody that, you know, the opposition is very strong, so that we've got to be sure and remind everybody that we know, and especially the legislators, the constituents, to be sure and support Prop 15, okay? Thank you. That's schools and communities first. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. I don't see any more questions in the chat box for our esteemed legislature panelists, and so I'm going to hand the mic over, if you will, to Jamie from Head Start California. And she was so kind enough to remind me that we are not part of the movement. The movement came from Hamilton. You clearly know what I've been watching since July 3rd, so that is where the quote came from.
And building off of that, also quoting Hamilton, my favorite quote, immigrants, we get the job done. So hi everyone, my name is Jamie Mauhai. I'm the Director of Government Affairs with Head Start California, and we represent the over 2,000 Head Start program sites in California. And I'm so glad we could all virtually be together today. And thank you to Donna at CAPA for being our fearless ringleader, our partners at End Child Poverty and California Food Banks. And we thank all of our panelists, legislators, Assemblymember McCarty, Assemblymember Wicks, Assemblymember Quirk-Silva, Senator Caballero, Senator Skinner, Senator Hurtado, and Senator Leyva. All of the advocates and parents on the call today. Special thanks to Kim Johnson for bringing that push, and of course the great Dolores for being with us today. So getting out of this economic spiral won't be a 1 year, won't be a 2-year fix. For our childcare and early learning system, there was a recent study that was noted that child and daycare centers will be in a free fall without any continuing federal or state childcare relief. So it's important that we are continuing to fight for our kids and families. Even though here in California, the state budget was passed and we're looking at the end of the legislative session, we still need to make sure that we're making meaningful investments in childcare and family support systems, which are absolutely needed for this economy to open up fully again. And as Dolores said, while the budget has passed, while we're nearing the end of this session, this isn't the end. It's really the beginning. And this pandemic is calling upon us not only to advocate for our kids and families, but it's also calling on us to lift our voices to demand justice and address systemic inequity. And I'll end with this quote. how we take care of childcare workers now is one of the most important steps that we can take to take care of us all. So with that, just wanted to thank you all for everything that you do for our kids and families. Let's keep at it, and I'm looking forward to continuing this fight together. And Donna, if you want to wrap this up for all of us.
Sure, thank you so much. And since Jamie didn't say it, I just want to give one last Hamilton pun and say we are so thankful that you are all in the Zoom where it happened. And we will be following up with all of you over email. We'll send the recording out, and please feel free to send any other questions over our way. We'll get them to the appropriate speakers and make sure that you can get the answers you're looking for. I echo the thanks to all of the legislators who joined us, Dolores Huerta, Adriana and Monique, National Women's Law Center, and Kim Johnson. It's so wonderful to have us all here together, really in community, coming together on these issues. And just so everyone knows, there will be more of these. And so we hope that you will join us in the future. We will be in touch. And thank you for being here. If anyone has any last minute questions, feel free to plug them into the chat box, or, you know, since we're at the very end, feel free to unmute yourself. Let's live a little and see what happens. But thank you. And yes, Carlo, the recording will be available. We'll be emailing out the link to the whole group. And so thank you for everyone. Thank you to everyone.